Good morning, everybody. I think we should begin, or good afternoon, excuse me. A very warm welcome to this seminar being organized at the request of the United Nations country team in Kazakhstan. My name is Nick Bonvoisen from the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. And this seminar is organized within the framework of the United Nations Interagency Issue-Based Coalition on Environment and Climate Change. And this coalition brings together 17 UN entities in Europe and Central Asia to provide coordinated support to UN country teams. I'm very pleased to say that we have brought together several experts from different organizations for you today. And I'd like to begin by thanking the Partnership for Action on Green Economy, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, the International Labour Organization, my colleague in UNECE, and the Office for Commission on Human Rights, for voluntarily sharing their expertise today. And the issue at hand, a just transition in cities dominated by a single industry, often mining or fossil fuels, is not a simple one. And we don't expect to be talking about solutions for individual cities in Kazakhstan. Rather, the aim is to give examples of good practices and perhaps some less good examples, and considerations that need to be borne in mind when aiming for a just transition. And this is, of course, with the aim of informing okay, sorry, I'm getting strange messages, informing the discussions. And before handing over to Michaela Friedberg-Story, the resident coordinator, I'd just like to announce a small change to the program, as Anna Paula Souza will replace Igor Grishko from the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. With that, it is my pleasure to hand over to the resident coordinator. The floor is yours, madam.
Thank you very much for that, Nick, and how very good to see all the colleagues that have joined this important seminar. And I really want to thank each and every one of you for delivering on our request to help us take this dialogue forward. As we're meeting today, we have a very challenging situation in Kazakhstan with very severe flooding in large parts of the country. And I would really like to recognize the tremendous efforts that are being undertaken by the government and the strong solidarity that is shown by all the people of Kazakhstan to the people that are being challenged by this. We know that this flooding also is, of course, linked to the current climate challenges that the country and the world is facing. And that is also why our dialogue today is so timely. Before I continue, I apparently need to confirm the language I am speaking. Can translators hear me properly? Yes? Okay, well, you let me know. Good. Спасибо, Sofia. So let me then continue and let me really express my appreciation for the IBC, for the issue-based coalition, and of course to you, Nick, for your tremendous support in getting this together. For us in Kazakhstan, to dialogue on just transition from mining and fossil fuels to a green economy in Kazakhstan is of utmost importance. We know how dependent the economy is on the fossil fuel, and we know how important it is for the country and the world that we transition, and that transition is just. I therefore am so glad that we've been able to have this dialogue today, not just internally within the UN, but that we also have it with our partners, with actors from the private sectors, with academia, to make sure that we all come together, because that is really what is needed. I think in order to move on the just transition from a strategic point of view, there are three things that we need. We need to have intentional thinking and planning. By that, I mean that we need to make sure that we think of just transition when we design our NDCs, not least. Today, only some 30%, 38% of the NDCs and 56 of all long-term strategies globally recognize just transition. The second thing is that after we've recognized it, we need to actually have governmental plans designed for it. And here we see how countries like Kazakhstan really need to lean forward, and the challenges are immense. Not only because of how the country is being faced by the climate and the heating that will take place, and some studies show that it might go as high as 5.7 degrees Celsius by 2085, but also, of course, of the fact that the country has its own carbon neutrality strategy to reach there by 2060. How can we support Kazakhstan in making this transition green and inclusive as it moves forward? And the third point, which I really believe today is a reflection of, is making sure that we do it jointly, involving all stakeholders and all capacities. So I am very grateful, to echo what Nick said, of the large engagement from UN entities across our big UN family, because this is not a one-man show or a one-person show. This is something where we need to come together, not only as the UN, but also with partners. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your experiences from settings that have faced similar challenges to those that are now facing Kazakhstan. Thank you so much, and I really look forward to today's dialogue. Thank you so much, and back over to you, Nick.
Thank you very much, and thank you for that introduction. So our first speaker is Sergei Vasilyev of the Partnership for Action on Green Economy and from UNDP, who will speak about just transition in Ekipastuz, Kazakhstan, and the broader challenges related to coal phase out in Kazakhstan. Sergei, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nick. And good afternoon, colleagues. I'll share my screen. Please confirm that you can see it.
That's good.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I would like to share some key findings that we had during our study, which was conducted in the framework of PAGE, which is Partnership for Actions on Green Economy of 5 UN agencies, namely UNIDO, ILO, UNDP, and UNEP. And I would also like to especially thank UNRCO office, who also contributed and supported to that particular study. Before going to the findings, I would like to mention that we have not considered whether it is needed to do the coal phase out or not to do that, or what should be the substitute for that. The questions which were put in front of us by the Ministry of National Economy is how coal phase out will affect households, especially in the regions which are highly dependent on coal, keeping in mind gas as a transition fuel. So that was the main focus of our study. And for that, to do the modeling, we used the scenario developed by our colleagues from GIZ, which displays how coal phase out may happen or should happen so that the country achieves its carbon neutrality objective by 2060. And our time horizon in our study was until 2030. So just to give a background information for those who are not very familiar with Kazakhstan, what are the typical residential consumers in the country, which represent like almost all urban households and the majority of rural households. So we identified 3 major groups which are households relying on central heating and electricity, households relying on coal for heating purposes, and central electricity and propane butane for cooking purposes, and households relying on natural gas for heating and cooking and electricity. So these are the three main types of households we're all looking at. This is an example of one of the region of Kazakhstan. I don't remember exactly which, but most probably one on the western part of Kazakhstan. And if you look at the energy burden of different types of households, no matter of their annual income. So here we have annual income, and here we have energy burden. We see that households who are using coal for heating purposes are those who are facing higher energy burden, followed by households who are using natural gas, and the cheapest one is, of course, centralized heating. So it doesn't really matter in what annual income category the households are. The coal is always on the top of the diagram. If we come back to the Pavlodar region and in Ekibastuz city, which is highly dependent on coal industry, we looked at what would happen if gas will be used instead of coal, how that will affect different types of households. So the findings were that households living in individual houses will pay 50% less for their energy bill or heating bill if the energy tariff in Pavlodar region will be among, if gas tariff in Pavlodar region will be among the lowest tariffs in Kazakhstan. Because in Kazakhstan, gas tariffs vary a lot from region to region. It will be 10% less if in Pavlodar gas will be sold at average national price. 50% more at higher retail tariffs, for example, like in Karaganda region right now, which is also a coal-dependent region, and 2 times more if gas prices will not be regulated or will be sold at real marketable price. For households living in an apartment, it will be the same price under current regulated regime and 2.5 times higher if regulation is relaxed. So that means that those households who are the most poorest one will need additional support from the local authorities. I'm rushing a bit because I have only 10 minutes to squeeze the whole study in. And the second angle which I would like to look at is labor force and labor demand, and focus on labor for discussing later on. So this is also an example from Ekibastuz. According to national statistics, right now it's around 7,000 employees working at coal mining sector. But this is only those who are very clearly tagged as coal miners in the national statistics. The figure is, in reality, the figure is at least twice higher or even more higher because, for example, for one of the biggest pit mines, they have just one company has over 7,000 working workers, but not all of them are tagged as coal miners. But anyway, if we look until 2030, at least 2,000 workers will need support for reemployment in the next 6 years. But if we look, follow the scenario which I was presented at the very beginning, in the next 5 years beyond 2030, this figure will be even much higher because the drop in labor force needed for coal mining will be very, very sharp. And I would like to stop at this slide with major findings, just summarizing not only about Equibus tools, but the country overall, and probably bring them up for discussions. So while the coal mining added value to GDP is rather small, the highest one is 2.5% in Pavlodar region, but the coal phase out may and will affect or higher impact on other industries relying on coal and communities, of course. And adding to that, such mechanisms like carbon border adjustment mechanism of European Union will considerably affect Kazakhstan in the absence of coal phase out. According to different estimates, it may be measured from hundreds of millions up to several billions USD annually, depending on the change of future export structure commodities of Kazakhstan and the scope of the CBAM. I mean, what products would be covered. As I already mentioned, that was one of the surprising facts for me, myself personally, that the coal is the most expensive fuel for heating purposes because it is less regulated. For example, comparing to gas tariffs, which are very strictly regulated. And the absence of price incentives creates risks for availability of marketable gas because most of us, we know that most of the gas in the market, it is associated gas from oil fields. And forecasts show that reinjection of gas to support the the pressure in the oil fields will increase from 36% up to 50% until 2025. And yeah, but there are also good things. I just caught myself that I'm kind of articulating only negative facts. But the good thing is that carbon neutrality strategy, it will create a substantial labor demand in cleaner sectors. For example, clean sectors may create up to 60,000 jobs, while coal production sector may lose about 15,000 jobs until 2030. And one of the most important ones is coal phase out production and use will help to decrease related diseases. First of all, respiratory ones, but for example, according to the data of the Kazakh Research Institute of Oncology and Radiology, Karaganda and Pavlodar regions have very high cancer rates comparing to country average. I would like to stop here and open discussions on those major findings or comments. Thank you. Nick, over to you.
Thank you, Sergey. It's very interesting, and it's interesting to see the difference in numbers of jobs, and also if you start considering also the health benefits and the carbon border adjustment. Are these all pushing in the same direction, or are they outweighed by the negatives that you've also highlighted? It's a very hard thing to say.
In the same direction, and the negatives, I mean, it's negatives in in commerce. They're not really negatives. It's all of them, I mean, are pushing to the same direction, that the coal phase out is what we need to achieve carbon neutrality. And the main goal of the carbon neutrality, aside from climate change, for example, objectives, is the health. that's and welfare of the population of Kazakhstan.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Because sometimes climate change is seen as something happening out there,
yes.
but for example, health-related impacts will be seen directly at the places where people live in the coal-dependent regions.
Thank you. Thank you, Sergey. Are there any questions? If you have questions, please do feel free to raise your hand. That's using the button for raise hand. Or the people want to first, please, Marat Imash, please go ahead.
Да, спасибо. У меня вопрос к Сергею. Да, действительно, Кибастуз, конечно, там добывается много угля, и основной потребитель – это электростанции, которые размещены в Кибастузе. Не могли бы все-таки, Сергей, вы в двух словах сказать о том, все-таки какие-то перспективные планы по в дальнейшем, опираясь на идею справедливого перехода, что-то планируется, какие-то стратегические, какие-то большие многолетние планы по переводу на, допустим, на тот же газ или, может быть, вообще какие-то другие варианты?
Да, спасибо, Марат. Насколько я знаю, да? То есть мы приняли стратегию по достижению углеродной нейтральности. Сейчас Министерство национальной экономики приступило к разработке плана достижения этой, да, roadmap по-английски, план действий по достижению углеродной нейтральности до 60-го года. Рабочая группа сейчас сформирована, да, начинается процесс написания этой дорожной карты. И я думаю, уже там будут конкретные предложения, конкретные механизмы достижения углеродной нейтральности. И если вы заинтересованы в этой работе, я думаю, вы можете присоединиться к работе рабочих групп по разным секторам, в том числе по сектору электроэнергетики, электро- и теплогенерации.
Да, я, Сергей, имел в виду, что тот же ArcelorMittal, вернее, сейчас он Корвет называется, все-таки тоже успел принять дорожную карту по достижению углеродной нейтральности. Но новый владелец заявляет себя как приверженец, что он не будет отступать от этих стратегических программ. И именно в этой связи у меня был вопрос, как обстоят дела в Кибастузе.
Насколько я знаю, ну, вот Кибастузский ГРЭС, те, которые принадлежат Самрук Энерго, то есть у Самрук Энерго также есть стратегия, я не уверен, это углеродной нейтральности или либо низкоуглеродного развития, да, то есть все группы компаний практически, которые находятся под Самруком, национальным холдингом Самрук Казана, они либо в процессе разработки, либо уже разработали свои стратегии низкоуглеродного развития.
Sergey, did you wish to respond on that?
Sorry? To which?
Did you wish to respond on that, or is that okay?
I just responded on that.
Oh,
Can you
sorry,
hear that?
sorry. I misheard, sorry. Okay, thank you. Okay, are there other questions? I do not see any questions. Actually, well, if not, thank you very much. I did see that there is a request to share the presentations afterwards, and if that's okay with the presenters, we will do so. Please do let me know. Okay, and actually, our next speaker should be Abu Said, but I see that Michal Drabik, there may have been a misunderstanding. Are you able to join us a bit later, Michal?
I mean, if I could present now, this would be much appreciated because I'm actually the parallel commitment, so I'm not sure I can come later.
Would this be okay with other presenters? If we just switch around, is that okay, Abu?
That will be okay for me.
Ah,
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you very much for your flexibility. So our next speaker then is Michael Drabik from UNECE on transformation of coal mining areas and communities, what worked, what did not work, which I think will be particularly interesting, and how the issue can be effectively tackled in the future. So Michael, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Let me just try to load my presentation. Just if you can bear with me for a moment. I will try to find it. I think it's this one. Can you see the presentation? I probably need to put it in the full screen. Is it okay now?
It's, I think it's coming. It's not full screen yet.
Is it not?
No.
Okay, let me try now.
Yes, it is now.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you, Miguel.
So thank you very much. My name is Michael Drabik. I'm the secretary of the UNECE group of experts on coal mine methane and just transition. My pleasure to be here, and I will present a brief presentation. I will try to fit to the 10-12 minute limit that I got. So I might be speaking a bit fast, and my presentation is also relatively long and text heavy, but this is on purpose. I will not read all what's on the screen. It is also for you to have access to it later, and I will be happy to respond to any questions you might have, either just after presentation or later. So my email gonna be also provided at the end. So I hope that this would help. So I'm gonna be talking about, I guess, much more theoretical, in a much more theoretical way that the presenter before me. It's about transformation of coal mining areas and about what UNECE group of experts on coal mine methane just transition propose here. I will also try to look at what's the current approach and what's the approach that we are proposing. So we all know that decarbonization is necessary if we want to keep the global warming below 2 degrees scenarios. We also know that decarbonization means that energy sector need to be modernized also, or in particular the energy sector that is fossil based, and not only the energy sector, but also its whole ecosystem, which includes steel or cement, which are also very much polluting and very much reliant on the coal. So modernization is inevitable. We know that decarbonization will bring a number of opportunities, but at the same time, it will also create some disruptive effects, and those would fall predominantly on the communities and regions that are currently based on legacy industries such as coal industry. However, the good news is that transformation can be accomplished efficiently, cost effectively, in a socially just manner. So the traditional approach as it is now, and I don't want to generalize it's everywhere, but this is what we see very often when just transition is being planned on the central level, is focused on today rather than tomorrow. So there is a lot of attention given to coal phase out, closure of the mines, and so on. Not so much to actually inventing what we're gonna replace it with, how to do it, what's this future for which we should prepare. It's also very much focused on particular sites. So it's dealing by side or community by community, rather than looking at the whole regions. And in many countries, coal regions are basically the whole regions that are based around coal. Of course, there are other activities, but the whole life basically was built around coal. And this is kind of what we need to change as well. We need to reinvent those regions as a whole, not one by one, each community, each industrial site. Then the traditional approach is very much focusing on two questions: technological, how to do this, and financial, who's going to pay for it. And very often the social and cultural aspects are being overlooked. And this is very important. I will be talking about it in a moment. And then the way how that transition is being proposed or being tried to be implemented is very top-down centralized planning. So it's on the high level. There are some plans based on the experiences of others and so on. And those are being proposed on local communities. Try to do this. It works somewhere else. Potentially, in theory, it should work. And there is not enough of local engagement trying to know what the actual local needs, local aspirations, and local capabilities are. It's not enough of this engagement. So examples from the past where it was done like this, basically majority, or if not all, present transformation that happened in the coal industry, such as UK, France, Belgium, Appalachia region in the US, was all done more or less along the same lines that I just presented. So the results are not very good. Basically, all those regions are worse off economically right now than they used to be. There is a lot of social exclusion and apathy. People were not taken care of. They don't have enough of self-energy, self-ideas of how to get out of the difficult situation, and they are very often not given enough support by the states to actually get over this. So this results that economies of those regions are stagnant and not very competitive. What's also important, and I'm going to be talking about in a moment, as I said, is this lost identity of the regions, as people, since this cultural aspect was not really taken care of, was not really taken into consideration, those regions which used to be based around coal mining, which normally in many regions was much more than just occupation, those people lost the whole sense of identity. And again, I will be talking about it in a moment. So how we see it, the just transition in our group of experts and the task force on just transition that we have. So the definition is that just transition is an integrated approach to sustainable development that brings together social progress, workers' protection, environmental consciousness, and economic success into a framework of democratic governance and institutional support. So it's a long definition, but let me briefly decipher it for you. So basically, social progress means that we aim to improve the well-being of people that are subject to transition. Workers' protection means that the transition cannot be delivered at the expense of the workforce of those legacy industries. Environmental consciousness means that transition can be based only on such transformative measures and mechanisms that actually improve the quality of natural environment. Economic success means that we aim for improving the situation of communities and regions that we are dealing with. Participatory government means that people that are subject to transition need to be actively consulted and engaged through a social dialogue on such issues as designing and implementing transition strategies. And what's also very important is not just engaging with them, but actually taking their concerns, opinion, and aspirations into consideration to the extent that warrants their ownership of the process and sense of responsibility for its results. And again, this is the second very important thing that I will be coming back in a moment, but it's very important that it comes from inside and that people take responsibility for the change. And final is the institutional support, which means that there are either existing institutions that sometimes need to be strengthened, or we create the new ones which are capable enough to actually design and develop and implement the transition. So how to do this? What's the approach that we are proposing? So it's a very much comprehensive system-wide strategy that needs to be built. As I said, we look at the whole regions and we have to focus on the whole region and on all aspects of the transition, meaning economic, technological, of course, but then environmental, social, and cultural. Without this, it's not gonna work. I mean, without this, all those projects that we are getting in all those separate areas or separate communities, they're going to be developed in silos, and they all together will not add up to some sort of coherent strategy of reinventing the economic profile of the region. So it's like, you know, imagine those little communities as different puzzles. And if you don't have a general strategy, those puzzles are going to be from different sets. So if you then put them all together, they will not create one coherent picture. So we need to first have a designed picture that we want to build, and then we can start putting those puzzles together. It's also very important because only by having those strategy and this approach, then those communities, they can precisely define what their needs are, and this can allow them to actually, you know, properly engage with the donors or send any sort of aid, whether from state or international aid agencies, because at the moment it's very often that those regions are in need, so they're accepting any sort of ideas that are coming. Whoever comes with money and some idea what to do is being accepted. Sure, let's do it because there is a need. It's better to have something than nothing. But then again, then you develop something that doesn't add up to some joint economic system that can work in the future and can be sustainable. If we have the strategy, what we are aiming for, then this whole situation can be reversed. If there is any aid agency or the government which comes to the community, then the community knows what to ask for. This is like, okay, this is the whole plan that we have. This is what we're missing. Help us with this. And I think that this would change completely the way how the transition is being delivered at the moment. Now, getting to the cultural aspect that I was talking before, for centuries, in many countries, coal mining was much more than an occupation. It was a craft. It wasn't actually sense of the way of living, which was provided people with the sense of identity and belonging to a given community and particular, heritage and culture. So we need to keep it in mind, because when we approach people with some proposal of change, it's already difficult that we ask them to change the way how they earn money. But if somehow it's associated with this, if they think that this change comes also with the fact that they will have to abandon all what they knew until now, all the traditions, all the sense, the way of living that was created around coal mining, then of course they will reject it. I mean, none of us is really ready for such a big change. So we have to make sure that the transition provides people with the new way of earning money. It's providing them with the economic security, but at the same time allows them to remain who they are and to stay within this cultural heritage that they developed over the years. So how this can be done? Basically, what we are as a group of experts advocating for is that transition needs to come from inside. So we need to engage with people, as I was saying before, and then we need to allow people to make their own choices. So of course we have to come and present what are the challenges, what are the options, what is being done elsewhere. But then we have to kind of guide people in their thought process of what they want to develop instead, rather than lead them, because they know the best what are their aspirations, what are their capabilities, what they want to have in this region. So the help is needed from the outside, but at the end of the day, the decision needs to be made by people. Those need to be their choices, because only then they're going to be responsible for the outcomes. And this is super important, because this is basically the condition for sustainability of the proposed solutions. If it comes from people, if people believe in those, if they take ownership, then they will want to make it happen, even if it takes effort. If it is something from the outside that is just imposed on them, and they don't believe that it can make sense, then basically you will lose people and you will not manage to actually have those results sustained over a longer period of time. So what UNECE group of experts is doing to help countries to go this route that we're proposing. So we help to plan and implement the transition. We develop certain tools to facilitate the transition, but we also offer a new approach to coal. This is something that we are trying to now advocate for, because we believe that coal as such is not necessarily bad. What's bad is burning coal so that it pollutes the environment. But at the same time, there is much more things that you can do with coal and with coal mining than just producing energy. So what we believe in is that coal should not be treated simply as a fuel for energy production, that it can be utilized, for other purposes. There can be other things which are high value resources that are produced from it, such as graphene, carbon nanotubes, and so on. But also the coal mining can be used for other purposes than just extracting coal for energy production. So, for example, there are recent discoveries, for example, in the United States, that in the coal mining tailings, there are other valuable resources that we were not aware of before. So those can be extracted, such as rare earth elements and so on. It happens actually in a number of places around the world. So this can actually provide an opportunity to develop industries related to coal mining that would be actually supporting the green economy. At the same time, it would allow to keep certain jobs not to be removed, because the coal extraction will still continue. Of course, there are some additional things related to it, to pollution, for example, like methane and so on, but this can be dealt with as well. So this can be, for example, additional way of using this. So from methane, you can produce hydrogen and so on and so on. So there is also this opportunity that coal mining areas, normally they have good infrastructure, whether energy infrastructure, road infrastructure, they also have well-qualified workforce. So all this can be used for other purposes than just extracting and burning coals. I don't have time now to really get into details of it. If you are interested of it, I would be very happy to respond to that by email. But this is this new approach that also allows for new options for financing, because the assets that otherwise would be stranded if we close coal mining, there's a lot of stranded assets. If we don't close the coal mining fully, it means that some of the assets are being protected. So this frees some money that can be actually invested into those new projects, helping to build this new green economy. So to sum up, our approach to coal, this new approach to coal, provides new opportunities for economic use of coal, liberates certain funds, and also mitigates those cultural problems related to the transition, because it still keeps mining going, so it still allow people to go through this change slower. It doesn't mean that those mines will never be closed, but it's actually prolong the process in time, at the same time addressing the main problem of pollution that comes from the coal, burning coal, almost immediately. So this is what we do, and we of course welcome opportunities to explore potential for cooperation on matters related to just transition with Kazakhstan. And here is these are my contact details. There is also a link to the webpage of our group of experts. You can see my 2 emails. So one email is my professional email. The other one is my private one. I'm giving the private one because actually in 2 days I'm going to be going for a short contract break, so my UN email will not be active. But if anybody would like to get in touch with me and to discuss those things, or to get in touch with the group, please also, until June, please write to me on my private email. And then I will be back in June, so I'll be happy to also to respond more once I'm back to the office. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you. And I think it was very useful to see also how things can go wrong, and the need to take a strategic approach. I like your focus on the cultural aspect and the ownership questions. I mean, I lived through not personally, but when I was young, I lived through the drama of a top-down closure of the coal mining industry in the United Kingdom. So it was indeed a cultural shock as well as an economic one. Do we have any questions? I cannot see at the moment. Sergey?
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, please go
Thank you,
ahead.
Michael.
Yes.
That was very interesting to see different ways of using coal, changing the paradigm. I have a very short question. I don't know if you have answer to that. How those transformative projects, I mean, they will require financing. How those projects are treated or would be treated by international financial organizations in terms of their not financing any coal-related projects right now? Thank you.
Yeah, so of course, I mean, am I unmuted? Yeah. So
yeah.
This is definitely the problem. And I think that, many organizations, many financial institutions are not willing to get any close to anything which is coal in its name. And I know it from personal experience, because our group of experts has a name on coal, mine, methane, and just transition. So as soon as financial institutions and other donors hear this, they don't even want to engage with us, or actually take some time, because over time we are often able to convince donors that it makes sense to actually cooperate with us and put money in some of those projects. I kind of giving some longer explanation to this. I will give you an example of how we dealt with coal mine methane. In general, once you deal with coal mine methane, you actually try to help the environment. I mean, you capture the methane, which otherwise would be vented. You approach any donor, he doesn't want to give you money, because there is this idea that, okay, if we give money for that, it would prolong the use of coal. So then you need to get into some sort of conversation, trying to say, for example, I don't know, in Poland, I'm Polish, we decided that we'll stop coal mining until 2049. So then you are trying to explain, okay, coal mining will explain anyway until certain time. So let's, for those 30 years from now, 25, let's try to do this if the country decided itself that it will do it in a way that it's more environmentally friendly rather than less. Of course, many of the organizations will not work with you. So then, for example, at some point we were discussing with the World Bank certain things. It never really worked to the point that we would get any financing or any support with the active coal mines. But what we managed to get was the interest of the World Bank in the abandoned mine methane. And then we linked it with mine closure, and then actually, okay, mine is closed, so there is no chance to prolong extraction. So why don't you kind of be ready to give money for AMM projects? So there are the ways. I think that there is a way of how you phrase it. And I think that in this case, the way how the project document or the project proposal would have to be written would be very much around just transition. the way how the coal part is presented would have to be very carefully presented to avoid exactly any sort of assumption that this would prolong the use of coal, but in fact it would. It's just, again, changing the point of view that this coal will not be used for energy production. So it will not be polluting to some extent. Of course, again, as I was saying, there would be some methane emissions, but this is another aspect to address that we are basically also ready to do. I mean, we know how to deal with methane. It's a matter of financing again with the coal mines. But I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying that the organization will jump, to give money for this sort of projects, but I think it makes sense if we are given an opportunity to actually present what we are offering. I think that it might work, particularly that, I think that it's also very important, and this is again subject for a broader discussion, but the general approach to coal that we have now and to fossil fuels somehow does not work. People don't want to see the elephant in the room. Basically, many international organizations don't even want to talk about coal because it's bad. At the same time, when Kyoto was adopted 30 years ago, we were producing 80% of energy from fossil fuels. Now, 30 years later, after all this very extreme approach of not touching coal and being rough for fossil fuels and so on, right now we are producing 81%. So, I think that we are doing something wrong. So I think that the world is slowly seeing that kind of approach of oral nothing is not working. So I believe, and our group is kind of trying to be realistic with the approach and trying to exactly promote those things that it's supposed to help, regardless of using certain words which are currently not appreciated, like the word coal.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. And with that, I think we should get on to the next presentation. So thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Thanks.
And this is from Abu Said of UNIDO, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, who will be talking about green industry transformation in Kazakhstan, an example from the Pavlodar region. Abu, the floor is yours. I can see your presentation and it's in the right mode. Over to you.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Greetings from UNIDO headquarters in Vienna. I will be very happy to share with you some information on the green industry transformation work that UNIDO is doing with a special focus on Kazakhstan. As you know that as an UN Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO is working in building resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and also fostering innovation. And we are doing this with several of our work, for example, with the technical cooperation project that we are implementing with the member states. We are providing action-oriented policy and advisory services to our member states. We are developing normative standards in order to achieve the target that I have stated just now. And at the same time, we are building and fostering partnership for the knowledge and also the technology transfer. One of the example that is relevant to today's webinar is that UNIDO has recently announced a global alliance on the responsible minerals. So one of the important objective of this alliance is to bring governments, academia, private sector, financial institutions, and also the technology provider to work together to build the capacity, and also developing international guidelines, standards, and very importantly, we are planning to develop an independent certification system in order to promote a sustainable supply chain for the critical minerals. Now, I will be happy to share with you some of the work that we are doing in Kazakhstan, especially under the Partnership for Action on Green Economy PAGE. And under this PAGE framework, we have worked together with other 4 agencies in doing several work. For example, we contributed to the development of the Jasel Kazakhstan, Green Kazakhstan national project. Especially UNIDO contributed to the industrial waste management part of this national project, and subsequently we worked together with UNITAR in developing an Excel-based tool which can measure the impact of EU carbon border adjustment mechanism in the country. That is the available, and very recently we contributed to the green economy concept that is being updated by PAGE and other agency. Our specific contribution was on the energy efficiency chapter. And since last few years, we are working in Pablo-Dar region on promoting green SMEs. I will be explaining this part a little bit details. And also we are commissioning another work with the big companies in order to decarbonize the industrial sector. So on the SME, green SME support project that we are working in Pablo-Dar region, you may know that according to the government eco code, there is an obligation to use the government emission payment fund for the environmental cause. So taking that as an opportunity, we worked with the national, with the Ministry of Ecology and Natural Resources, and also the Pablo-Dar regional government to come up with a project that we have these opportunities from the emission payment fund, and how that can be utilized to support the green SMEs in the region. So support in terms of we provide them the financial incentives in order to implement the green project, like the energy efficiency measures, working on the building retrofitting and other works that may support the environmental cause, at the same time that can help to create the green jobs in the country. How based on this approach, our experts together with the provincial government, we develop a regional program for this financial scheme, and it looks like this. So in the step one, we work with the Akimat government or provincial government. They put a pot of funding from their emission payment fund to the DAMU Entrepreneurship Development Fund. And then we had an agreement with the DAMU also. DAMU will put their own fund together with the fund from the regional government, and then that is being deposited in a financial institutions or in a bank. So there is a secure funding that can support the green SMEs. Now the ESCO companies, energy serving service companies, or the green SMEs who are interested to implement the green project in the region or in the country, so they can apply for the financial loan to the financial institutions or bank, and then two entities, bank and also the regional entity, they work together to make a decision on the loan. And on the top of this loan, this the regional government, they provide subsidies to these SMEs. It could be 10%, it could be 15%, but the condition is that the SMEs or ESCO companies, they receive the funding after they put the equipment in place or they have completed the work. So the work has already been done or it's going on, and then they get the financial incentives on the top of it. I will explain this a bit more. So you can see from the diagram, the ESCO company can submit the application or the loan to the SEC Pablo-Dar. This is a regional body, and the technical partner, they will assess the proposal and then send it to the bank, and at the same time to the regional council. And the regional council is the one who decide either to provide this subsidy or the incentives 10 or 15% to these SMEs is or not. So based on the decision, if the decision is the yes, then the bank also independently make a decision to give the loan. and the SMEs can implement the project they are intended to implement. So what is the ultimate benefit of implementing this is that the energy savings can be created. We can also reduce the emissions, and the employment will be the created, and the green investment will be generated. At the same time, the green technology promotion can also be made. So this project was, the regional program was developed in cooperation with the regional government. Now we are working with the National Public Administration Authority to organize a training for the all regional bodies, so that other region can also take this idea and implement in their region. So the next project that I would like to share with you, that we are going to commission a low carbon industrial development project for the big companies. Under this project, we are considering to work with around 8 to 10 big companies to see what are the potential opportunities and options for the low carbon industrial development. So our expert will work together, will assess their industrial environmental condition, set a benchmark, and guided the companies what are the areas they can improve on the material efficiency, energy efficiency, waste management, and also what are the avenues they can reduce their emission portfolio by promoting technology, or even it could be done by low cost or no cost intervention. So we will work together with these companies. We'll organize also the capacity building workshops, so that necessary skills and capacities are built in the country. And at the same time, we will select 2-3 companies, and we'll work together to develop a specific strategy for them, so that they can follow, and the legacy of this low carbon industrial practice remains with the companies in the country. With that, I would like to stop here and give floor back to Nick. I'm happy to take the questions and comments.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Abu. So you broaden things out a bit again to look at the whole of the economy and greening, supporting of greening of industry. Are there questions from the floor? Would anyone like to ask questions? I wondered actually if this has been tied at all to the transition. I mean, of course, it is about greening industry and so on, but and small industry and small enterprises and so on. But has there also been any sort of link with the fossil fuel industry in Kazakhstan?
Thank you, Nick, for the question. Yes, indeed, the low carbon development work that we are going to commence, on that one, we are planning to work with the oil companies and to see what are the avenues and opportunities, what are the standard practice at the international level that the companies in Kazakhstan can follow. And our plan is to work with them, especially
Right.
we do have a request from the ministry that we work with the national oil companies to help them in developing a customized strategy for them, so that they can follow that pathway. So yes, we do have that plan.
Great, thank you. And before Michael was, emphasizing this ownership question of communities. Do you look at beyond the enterprises, looking at the communities as well, or you're really focusing on the enterprises?
The work we have been doing at the moment, we are focusing on with the SMEs and also industries, I would say. But we do have the engagement with the youth and also the gender community. So
Okay.
their tasks, and it is inclusive. And the time we talk about the inclusive and sustainable industrial development, the concept itself covered the other communities who are the lag behind, and we make sure that there is no one left behind.
Okay.
Thank you.
You. I don't see any questions. And if not, then we can catch up a little bit. So thank you again, Abu.
Thank you.
And we move on to Cristina Martinez of ILO, the International Labour Organization. And thank you for your patience, Cristina. Cristina is going to be talking about closing coal-fired power plants in Spain and tripartite agreements for a just transition. So,
thank you, Nick.
You're
you
sharing
see the?
you're sharing
Yes.
Zoom at the moment.
Oh, again, this issue. And now?
No, let me know if you want me to share.
I don't know why it's setting in mine, but let me try once more, and if not,
Yes,
of course you can share. It's still not there?
One moment. Yes, it is there.
Is there now?
Perfect. Yeah, it's good. It's good. It wasn't full screen, but it was.
Okay, I will put it
you've gone again.
full.
You've gone again. Shall
Okay,
I share it?
Put my camera. I cannot put the camera on because otherwise it doesn't.
Let me share instead then.
It's now there?
It's there now, yes.
Okay, so let's go like this. I can put my camera to say a few words at the end. But first of all, thank you very much to our resident coordinator in Kazakhstan, to the resident coordinator office, and also the IBC core group, and particularly to you, Nick, our chair today, for organizing this dialogue. You will see that we have certain convergence already among UN agencies, and I'm from the International Labour Organization. I'm the senior specialist on enterprise development, green jobs, and just transition, and the IBC focal point from the regional office for Europe and Central Asia. So I'm going to continue with this convergence that you can see with the presentations before me, from excellent presentations, by the way, from colleagues from PAGE, where we participate also from Michael UNECE. We are also part of the task force for just transition, and of course from Abu from UNIDO. But I want to focus on the tripartite agreements for a just transition and what this has meant in an example that I think will be interesting for Kazakhstan on closing coal-fired power plants in Spain. And there are some lessons that we know from coal communities in transition everywhere. And apart from the ones that have been said already, there is an issue of shrinkage coming with the transitioning. It's a shrinkage of population, businesses, economic activity, government services, education services, because the economic activity decreases, at least when the transition is not well planned. And this results in what is called a shrinking mining city. I'm not going to extend on this, but if you look at the literature, you will see that there is a growing amount of discussion in relation to this global type of city that is different from many others. And on these cities, we need to reposition and connect the regional innovation system. We need to design strategies for retaining skills and talents so that they don't all go away and move. We need new uses of industrial and town infrastructure, what is called as well a smart shrinkage, so that the shrinkage that might be unavoidable can be also a smart way for a better community. And there is a market for green knowledge-intensive business services, green KIPs that can be developed. And not all territorial strategies always bring transformation, but certainly there are a few aspects that needs to be considered, from entrepreneurship, technological innovation, the focus on green skills, the support to SMEs access to finances, as Abu was referring before. How communities could successfully make this transition to avoid some of the constraints. The ILO have guidelines for just transition that I think are very useful also for this discussion. And recently, in June 2023, the International Labour Conference adopted a resolution on just transition to environmental sustainability for communities. And within these policy areas for action that you have on the screen now, the communities and the workers and employers, governments affected can work out a plan. And one example of the impact is from Southeast Asia and how coal phase out can impact jobs. And this is a report that I'm not going to go into this report, but my colleagues here in the call can put it in the chat if you want to have a look, also together with the resolution on just transition. Let's have a look to the example from Spain. And I'm going to focus on the just transition agreements in a series of regions, specific territories where Spain prepared an urgent action plan with sectoral agreements with trade unions and companies, a framework agreement for a just transition for coal mining and for sustainable development of mining regions. And you can see how in Spain, the north, in particularly north and towards the area, the region of Galicia, Asturias, León, has been particularly affected. The just transition agreements are now 4 years on, and the framework is until 2027. The agreement also covers coal power plants, the transition for coal power plants, focusing on jobs, industry, and territories. And these agreements are not just about investing in these regions or having grants for the region, are about sustaining actions where you have the workers, the employers, and the government, local governments, all involved in pushing forward for a different pathway that reactivates affected areas, and using multiple support instruments that are available from national sources to private sector to European sources. The lessons learned, and I have 3 lessons that I want to share with you. One is that all affected workers receive social aid and job banks to promote employment and reskilling opportunities. There are direct workers and there are indirect workers, but those affected need to have some type of pathway to sustain their capacity to live in the region if they wish, and to be relocated to other jobs or perhaps entrepreneurship. So there are programs for individualized professional advice and support to find new jobs, and programs for reskilling green jobs. There are also synergies between environment and jobs. Environmental restoration is an enormous task that in other previous transitions might not be addressed fully. So we need to fix or restore those landscapes, but also improve water quality, work with waste management to eliminate hazardous waste. We need to focus on the ecosystem restoration and socioeconomic development of local communities that might be affected by the destruction of the environment during 100 years, 200 years of mining in a particular area. Second lesson is the involvement of companies at every level. And on these agreements that the Spanish government put in place, initiatives are presented through agreements among the workers, employers, and government, and there are support schemes that create a number of jobs that are similar to that are lost because closure. And you can see that the private investment that has been mobilized is quite substantial, 7,000 million euros. The agreement with companies for the closure of coal power plants is or has been not particularly difficult because, of course, companies operating the power plants are already aware of the limitations of coal, the transition to renewable energies, the opportunities that are around other types of renewable infrastructure, and therefore those agreements have been not as difficult as maybe they were 30, 40 years ago. And the support to local businesses, projects, and entrepreneurs, the support to reactivate and reposition the entrepreneurial ecosystem in these areas is a substantial part of a just transition planning. The third lesson is working closely with municipalities and the support to municipal projects, projects that are led by local councils, projects that improve local services for population, economic activities, and protecting the environment. And if you go back to what I said at the beginning about the shrinking mining city, you would understand why supporting municipal projects will work towards smart shrinkage and about addressing those limitations that facing mining closure or power plant closure can bring. In this particular example from Spain, many projects, 220, have been approved, 200 million in aid for local municipalities, and a constant assistance to these municipalities for many different projects. And you have some examples: restoration of mining and industrial heritage for new uses, sustainable tourism, digitalization, co-working and entrepreneurship, infrastructures to boost economic activity, and social housing, social sanitary centers. You see in that photo that I put this for you with the cooperation from the Spanish government, the Just Transition Institute, there is a train, a steam train that was working perhaps 50 years ago, many years ago, when the coal was transported from the north of the Bierzo region, in the north of Spain, to Ponferrada. That was the city where then the coal was transported to the power plant that is now closed. And that was abandoned at some point because there was no more coal to be transported, or very little. Now it has been restored. It's called the Ponfeblino, joining two municipalities, Ponferrada and Villablino. So the Ponfeblino is the mining train that is now to be used for tourism usage. And it responds to that legacy of the mining regions, to that culture, to that identity that Michael was talking about, where we see the region, even after years, 20, 30 years of mining closure, still having an identity that is linked to this type of industry. And I'm going to finish with some advice that we are taking into account this advice, these examples for what we call the two-lane highway for a just energy transition in Kazakhstan. And the ILO is preparing a proposal to continue the work that PAGE initiated in Kazakhstan. So continuing this intervention, PAGE is graduating this year, but we will continue working on just energy transition with an integrative approach where we can look at how social dialogue can work at the same time for improving occupational safe and healthy and health actions in the mines. And unfortunately, we have 53 miners died during 2023. So this is urgent. It cannot be a just transition and not to look at how coal is continuing, how coal might be phasing down during just energy planning, but the occupational safe and health of the mines needs to be restored, needs to be increased, needs to be enhanced. And at the same time, we can work on productivity, on green innovation, responsible business practices, enhance SMEs and value chains, and we can look at gender responsive and inclusive green jobs and skills for promotion through active labor market policies and social insurance. And with this, I'm going to try to stop. I think that I have managed to stop the presentation and indicate that, of course, we are very glad to continue cooperating with the agencies and looking forward to the two-lane highway where we have the coal, but we have a just transition planning that improve the jobs for and the communities. Thank you. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Christina. Are there any questions? Please just raise your hand if you have a question. I actually had one question, which was, I mean, ILO always works with trade unions, companies, and governments, and in this case, you focused on the municipalities. And I wondered how effective municipalities are as a surrogate for the community. We talked about before, other speakers mentioned the importance of the community and whether the municipality is sufficient or for other aspects. Thank you.
Right, it's a very, very interesting question, Nick. When we have a just transition that does not involve the municipalities, we can have a disconnection of a very important part of the innovation system. And for example, when the municipality is not involved, local Tibet institutions that work on skills, local university branches, local companies that work on the provision of skills might not be involved, and the investment in the community might be populated by international consulting, for example, or by universities from other parts of the country or other parts of the region. In Central Asia, in this case, could be. So it's in the best interest of the just transition planning that the municipality is very well engaged with the workers, the employers, the local, the regional government, and the national government as well. But they are a fundamental part. And this is not just our opinion. The OECD, we did an analysis, probably now, it was 2010, and that showed as a risk factor for failure on transitioning of closure of mines and power points, not to involve the local municipality.
Thank you. Thank you. Before we go on to our final presentation, I don't know if any of the other presenters also want to intervene on this or other issues. I don't know if Sergey or Abu wish to react at all. If not,
This is fine.
Abu, would you like to say something?
This is fine, I think. Please
It's
go
fine.
ahead. Thank you.
Okay. Right. Well, thank you again, Christina.
Thank
And
you.
we move on to our final presentation, which is by Ana Paula Souza from the Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights, who will be talking about a human rights perspective on just transition.
Thank you.
Ana, are you with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Good.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here today, even in short notice. And apologies for not having any PowerPoint to share. This is down to my very rudimentary skills. So I thought I'll be better spare you with that. And this goes to drawing, singing, and so on. But well, all presentations, and mine included, will highlight that while transition is imperative, it's important to define where we need to transition to and the means to get there. Findings such as those from PAGE that was presented by Sergey provide the baseline to understand the steps that a country, in this case, we are talking about Kazakhstan, needs to take to ensure that a transition builds social trust and leads to fair and inclusive processes. While just transition has become a buzzword, and you'll be surprised how little consensus there is around its definition beyond the parameters of the ILO. We see, like, especially in those negotiations, multilateral negotiations, and I follow many of them, there is a clear divide when we see developed countries understand that we must transition now, immediately, while developing countries understand that they first need the means to reach a level of development to then be able to transition to more sustainable economies. And what makes a transition just seems highly subjected to states' interests. And while these discussions take place, the planet hangs on a thread. So I really thank and congratulate the initiative from the RCO to put this topic on the table. We need to have more discussions on just transition. But from a human rights perspective, just transition refers to a transition to an economy that is fair, equitable, inclusive, and sustainable, creating decent work opportunities, reducing inequalities and poverty, as well as upholding the human rights of workers and affected communities, in particular communities affected by environmental degradation and by the measures that are needed to address it. As we know so well, those who contributed the least to the environmental crisis are often the ones who suffer the most. This is why equity and justice should lay at the heart of just transition pathways. To illustrate, today, an estimated 775 million people globally live without electricity. We've progressed towards the 2030 goal of universal energy access for all, having decidedly reversed during the COVID-19 pandemic. Any transition that further embeds this status quo is the very opposite of just. If we are to seize the unique opportunity to ensure more equal energy systems across the globe, we need to ensure that communities tangibly benefit from the clean energy transition and the development of the resources that will support it. This starts with recognizing local communities, in the case of Kazakhstan, those communities dependent on coal, as equal partners in the transition. Policies and practices that prioritize co-ownership, co-equity, and true co-benefit with communities affected by transition, mining, and renewable energy projects are essential. And I think this ties, again, with all what has been said from previous speakers. What I'm trying to say here is that if the process of transition is not just, then its outcomes will not be just either. There must be focused social policies to mitigate and protect against the difficulties of industrial and economic change as countries shift to renewable energy. But this process is not straightforward, as we have seen today already. while a just transition can open an array of opportunities and minimize environmental impacts, ensuring that the rights of workers and those most affected by environmental degradation are safeguarded, this transition does not automatically guarantee equitable outcomes. For instance, renewable energy projects and rare earth mineral exploitation, as we've been seeing in the work that we do in the office, is leading to displaced communities and is exacerbating inequalities. So that's why we always place focus not only on the measures that we need to transition, but also what the impact of those measures will have or are having in the communities affected by them. This is why it's essential for the just transition to put people at the center, ensuring that workers, including the informal sector, micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises and communities affected by environmental harms and actions to address them are protected. According to the International Energy Agency, we require a six-fold increase in so-called transition minerals extraction by 2040 to achieve the 2050 carbon targets. At the other end of the clean energy value chain, the renewable energy sector continues to grow, set to become the largest source of electricity generation globally over the next 2 years. This reality represents enormous opportunities for the companies and their investors that will drive and profit from these expansions. But so too must it provide real benefits for the communities, many of which are dependent on, for example, coal and so on, that will be tasked with hosting their operations across this value chain. So for enormous transition mineral miners with real environmental and social consequences, to huge wind and solar farms that require the vast tracts of land on which communities have lived for decades. Evidence suggests that companies will still have some way to go. Attacks against environmental human rights defenders continue to rise, and allegations of human rights abuses, from land grabs to forced relocations, persist across the renewable energy value chain. Protests and community challenge to these projects as a result of human rights infringements are decidedly on the rise, halting on delaying projects essential to the energy transition across the world. And we see this from Latin America to Africa to Europe. And it will be interesting to hear what's the context in Kazakhstan. This mode of operation is one that a world dependent on a transition to clean energy cannot afford. Mining companies, the wider extractive industry, renewable energy companies, and their investors have an obligation to stand at the forefront of efforts to strengthen human rights protection in the transition to clean energy, and certainly to avoid contribute to the abuse of the communities and workers. And we must remember that just transition should not be constrained to the energy sector. It is important for all economic sectors, the formal as well as the informal economy, from energy and transport to agriculture to financial services, and for countries at all levels of development. To achieve just transition goals, policies and programs must be tailored to the specific conditions of each country, respecting their stage of development and economic sectors. This includes embracing international labor standards and human rights. Examples of effective strategies are just transition agreements, community planning, and establishing just transition commissions to facilitate robust social dialogue. Effective planning for a just transition hinge on robust social dialogue, transparency planning, and meaningful stakeholder engagement. It's imperative that all voices are heard. Human rights principles of equality, meaningful participation, transparency, and accountability are a guide for sustainable development, social protection systems, and a just transition. In closing, in November last year, OHCHR and the ILO launched a set of key messages on human rights and a just transition. These 10 key messages are as following. 1, ensure equity and justice. 2, mobilize maximum available resources for sustainable rights-based development, including through international cooperation. 3, guarantee access to information, participation, and access to justice. 4, ensure the right to work, including a safe and healthy working environment, and promote capacity building and skills development, particularly for workers in the informal sector. 5, ensure the protection and representation of informal workers, including the design and implementation of just transition policies. 6, guarantee access to adequate social security. 7, ensure gender equality and women's rights. 8, require business enterprises to respect human rights. 9, respect, protect, and fulfill the rights of individuals, groups, and peoples in vulnerable situations. And last but not least, 10, protect environmental human rights defenders. Happy to explain some of these points if there is interest, but also I'm going to leave the resource to, those set of key messages in the chat for those who are interested to learn more about it. And with that, I'll close. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a very clear presentation, bringing many different elements together. And I especially appreciate your emphasis that just transitions shouldn't mean freezing development and maintaining some sort of status quo of low-income countries and higher-income countries. And but different populations see a just transition in a different way. And also your emphasis again on stakeholders. I think we can see that we have to make sure that indeed no one is left behind. I mean, it's but we need to bring all of these different stakeholders together and in a clear process, a transparent process, and a fair process. So, are there any questions or reactions from the participants or from the previous speakers? I do not see any, but thank you, Ana Paula. That was really good. Thank you. And have you dropped in the chats the link to the ILO OHCHR?
Yes, I have.
You have. Great. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. Well, I think that we should not complain if we finish a little bit early. We're very efficient, so that's good. I would maybe ask if Michaela, would you like to come in at this point? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nick, and thank you all colleagues for your presentations and for joining this. I mean, I take away the fact that we are facing an enormously complex transition for Kazakhstan as such, and I really appreciate the work that agencies are doing within PAGE, of course, but also individually. There's a number of agencies working outside of PAGE that also focus on this. I truly think it's been interesting to hear some of the experiences from other countries and the importance of then contextualizing all these good practices, not only to the national level, but to really bring it down to the municipal, the village level, the region level, whatever level we interact with there on the government. And also the fact how you so clearly shared examples of how you work with the authorities at every level and the private sector. I think what I also heard from our colleagues from UNIDO is, of course, how they're doing it in Pavlodar, a city that is now also being very challenged. So it's really something that I hope we can continue to do with. And we have opportunities in Kazakhstan, and I think it's important to really take those. I listened to was it Michael's presentation from UNECE on how we can use coal for other things. The thing is, it has to be able to be taken to scale to absorb the enormous quantities that Kazakhstan now has and the very large workforce. So coming back to what colleagues, Ana Paula, you were saying about the transition minerals, and this is also where I think it's important to recognize the strategic relationship between the EU and Kazakhstan when it comes to the precious metals and minerals and the strategic partnership they have there, because the abundance, if I may say so, of cobalt, lithium, beryllium, nickel that is in Kazakhstan, that is here, has to be, as you said, Nick, used in a way that it's sustainable in the way that it actually contributes to the country's economic development without eating into the future of the generations to come. And we do have a challenge here, and I think we would be, we have to be honest about that challenge, because we also know that there is no one who is more committed than to make Kazakhstan prosperous and peaceful and healthy in its development than the government of Kazakhstan. And I think that's an opportunity for us as partners to Kazakhstan, is really to make use of Kazakhstan's own desire to be sustainable in what they do. And I feel that Kazakhstan wants our support. So I am very, very glad and grateful for the engagement from you and colleagues, because there is an appetite from Kazakhstan to listen to the UN, to dialogue with the UN. But what we must do, and that's why I'm also glad that we are multi-stakeholder here, is that we need to bring in and work very closely with the private sector. Whether we do it through member states, and also make sure that member states bring their investors, because this is not going to be just IFIs, this has to be the private sector. So for me, one thing that I really want to explore, and that we're doing not least with the Global Compact, is how we can be, the UN, the private sector, or the investors rather, I should say, the investors and the government, both nationally, regionally, and locally, with a human-centered approach in the middle. You see, I'm making like a triangle with a person in the middle, right? but I think we need to really, as the UN, unpack the potential of private investment in the context, not just in narratives, not just in do's and don'ts, but in the actual context where it will impact, because it will be different in every village where we have this sort of single industry villages. So I got a lot of food for thought. Sorry, colleagues, I went on there a bit, but I'm so full with ideas and so grateful for your work. And I see that a lot of the PowerPoints have been posted. Please make sure that you share them with us. We will continue to build on this. And colleagues, whenever you pass through Astana, which I hope you do very regularly if you're not based here, my door is always open. There's always a cup of coffee or tea. Please come by, and I would love to learn more about the fantastic work that you're all doing. Nick, thank you so much for taking us through today. Thank you.
Thank you. And if I may, I would just like to add one thank you to Marat Shashkinov of your office for making this happen. So thank you, Marat. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. It's an honor. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye, and see you soon. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you.
Thank you.